The object is very simple and mundane. It is a peanut. We all know what peanut is. Peanut is a global crop, is a food which I think everyone has peanuts in their country, right? So anyway, the peanut that I'm talking about was the center of a project which from Research Initiatives Bangladesh, which we did in the northern part of Bangladesh, northwestern part of Bangladesh. And it was regarding peanuts there are a cash crop, which grows in the sort of spring to summer time, and it is a cash crop because it brings in a lot of money to the farmers, more than the usual vegetables or potatoes or tomatoes that we know. But in Panchagor, when RIB is in short Research Initiative Bangladesh, where I did my most of my action research from, started a project trying to do collective self-inquiry with a host of women. And these women were not farmers, they were wives of farmers. And in that area, uh, the women did not work in the field, they worked at home. And they were supposed to work. The social norm was men worked in the field and women worked at home. In many other parts of our country, we do have women working in the field, but not in this area. So when these women were entered, they were very poor women from very poor households, and uh, and we had a 3-year long project with them. There was an animator helping them to do this collective self inquiry, but Anisur Rahman was also an advisor to us. And when he used to discuss these projects, sometimes he was very uncomfortable with the fact that these women are doing it out of their own accord to solve their own problems of poverty. And yet there was this animator who was being paid in full for 3 years by RIP. And he says this is not done. So I think what we should be doing, he suggested, is that gradually you withdraw the animator from the collective's inquiry process, and slowly but surely. Of course, at first they will need some encouragement. The animator was a local person, but not a woman, and not a part of that look, and not definitely a group member. So, how to do this? So, we started actually that any project which exceeded 2 years, we would be trying to slowly withdraw the animator from the process of collective inquiry and give more and more space to the group members themselves, which were in this case women. So that is what we did. And at first, but how do you sustain the process? Because there is a process, there is a kind of infrastructure facility needed to bring the women together, to sit in one place and discuss the things. So the women decided to form a women's collective at first, which we call in the tradition way, Mushti Chal Shomiti. Mushti Chal means fistful of rice. Um, so the fistful of rice is basically each, because traditionally again the woman cooks for the home, and that is her traditional work that we perceive. She Each week from her rations she takes a fistful of rice and saves it up, so that by once a week she can donate it to the common fund of rice. So together, when all the women, say 8 women, puts in once a week the rice together, it forms quite a bit, and then it is sold in the market when they get a good price for it. So that is a traditional way of saving in our country. So it was nothing new, but through the money that was acquired, the women would be raising, say, cattle, some calves, and some goats, baby goats, and gradually, when they grew up, they would be sold in the market as well for a good price. So this was a way that the women was doing it for the last 2 years. But then they decided that they got enough money, more than enough, to buy goats and calves. And they thought that now we can maybe lease in some land and cultivate peanuts, because peanuts was the usual crop that is grown there. But then if they, who will work the field? Then the women says it's difficult to get labor at that time, so we will work the field ourselves. But then the real problem came was, you have to break certain social norms to do that. It is not allowed for women to work in the fields. And then these women will so then they started debating among themselves. They started talking to each other, and the majority, at one point in time, the majority of the women decided, we will work the field. We will be cultivating peanuts and getting the money out of that by selling them. So, but the majority was in favor of it. Even then, the day came when they started out into the fields to, they leased in a plot of land, and they went through the payment and everything. So the day came when they had to go out and dig in the fields. Then some women were still hesitant. Then there was this particular woman who was a school teacher, a primary school teacher, and she took the lead. She said, I'm a primary school teacher. If I can do the work, as a teacher, I can do this work, so can you. And she took hold of a shovel and started digging. There were some other women who refused to come because their husbands would object. So for them, what happened was, it was also the decision of that group that they will not rustigate anyone who cannot work. They will let them go. They will not force anyone to work. So that was a common decision, and they started to work the fields. At the same, a few weeks later, it caught the attention of the men. Some of the neighboring men came and says, hey, do you work for others as well? Would you work for me? I have a dearth of labor problems, so would you like to work for me? So some of the women agreed to do that. And other women from other villages came in and said, oh, we would like to work with you. Can you take us? They were not group members, but they came. And then they also asked them, can you teach us how to do this process of self-inquiry, which you did, action research? We would like to do that as well. So that's how the project grew. They cultivated their first crop, came up, and they got loads of money in the market for it. And their families were happy. Now, what happens? That was 10 years ago, 10 or more years ago. What's happening now? What's the update? So I got my colleague, we don't work there anymore, but I got my colleague to call them up. They pick our phone up. They're very friendly with us still. And they said, yes, we still work, but we work now many women are working in the field, but we don't get ourselves together in a collective group anymore. That became irregular once Rib left. But then what we did was, we took our actions into our households. And that really created a difference, because when they went back to their households and did the same kind of work that they used to do as a collective, it actually changed the gender relations within their households. Their husbands started to accept them more. They played a strong part in the household decision making, whether to send their children to school or not, where to send them. All these, they became quite, and now more and more, it's quite usual for that group, for that area, to see women working in the fields. They now grow potatoes, vegetables, tomatoes as well, not only peanuts. So my this story, the question that I want to address, now this was a big thing that many feminists have not been able to do. Many women's movement have not been able to achieve, to change the social norms, to break the barriers. How could the women do it? Um, well, was it? Why was it possible for the women? Well, one, I think they mainstream their work within the family instead of pursuing collective method at some time or the other. So in the family was a mainstream site of, of production, as it was. Only the men produced and the women reproduced. But this time, the women also became producers and became accepted as one. And that helped to change the gender relations within the family. They were respected more, they were given a kind of a dignity which lacked before, and their work was respected because it also brought in money. They also chose a cash crop initially, which enabled them to earn a sizable profit, and that made a difference to their poverty. So they were very clever that they chose a cash crop, which actually made, which were from where they could save up enough to send children to school, to go for health care where they weren't able to before. Thirdly, it increased the mobility and visibility of women in the public places. So they would have to go to the market, they would also have to go to shops, they would have to go to landowners who would sometimes employ them. Um, so their mobility increased. And finally, they could influence future generations by enabling education for their children. So this is the how they broke their barriers. Now, what is the contribution of such thing? And you asked me to talk about contribution to participatory research. I will not only say only participatory research, but also feminist theory and research and practice. What does it do to them? So, in turn, it was something new did happen, and the women themselves don't know how much and what they created. They just enjoyed their lives from then on. But um, what really happened from an academic point of view, if you look at it, is that the change that was incited is incited internally and not rather than through external influence. No one from RIP came and told them what to do. No one even came from the nearest women's organization and said, you can do this, you can do that. They did it out of their own volition and their own effort. Also, it meant women were deciding and interrogating their own behavior. Most of the time we interrogate other people's behavior, but here the women was actually deciding that no, we want to do this, and the other women didn't want to do this, so we led them not to do this. That is also a woman's decision. So this was interesting that they were deciding on the nature of their work, and also the importance of economic rationality as collective inquiry process. Most of the time we think that collective inquiry process is about raising consciousness. Believe me, everyone knows is conscious about what they want and what is right and wrong, but they are actually, they thought of economic rationality. And I say this not only in this field, but in other fields where women did lease in some land to cultivate various crops. Very interestingly, we think that farmers know better what crop to sow, when and where, but women also know. And the profit, because in other places women also said, they came up as some, we took some university students down to question these women, and they said that what else will you plant? Will you just go off? And so you planted cauliflowers and you got some things done, some got some money. What will you plant next? Said, no, we're going to plant some grapes and oranges and things like that. They said, and they laughed. They said, these women doesn't know anything, that these are they're very expensive crops. But that is exactly why women wanted to. They reached for the high end market. They knew that they didn't have lots and lots of land so that if they will be competing against male farmers if they produced rice or produced wheat, because that will need a lot of land. They have only that much money to have a little plot by themselves, and if they planted crops that produced expensive fruits and vegetables and reach the high-end market, then they will get more profit from it. So there is an economic rationality there, which none of us at RIB even thought about. But this was a difference that they made. They chose peanuts, which was a high-end crop at that time. And they also were able to decode work from a gendered perspective. Social norms said this work is good, that work is bad, this work, like the teacher who said, I teach, but I also dig fields, cultivate fields. So that she came with a decision. They decoded what was work, what the social society told them that this was work and this was not work. Household, caring for children, caring for elders, feeding baby calves, that was work for women, but not others. Uh, Cultivating peanuts was not work meant for women, but they changed that. And by decoding what work was and what work meant for them, looking at households or families as a site for social change. We don't tend to do that. We think social change, you need a rally, you need to go to the government, you need to petition. Of course, we need to do that. But that's not the only way. Social change can also take place. The site can be your own household. I've done some studies on elections, and I've seen how that goes about. All the women candidates who stand for being elected says, first you fight your own family, then you fight the other voters, then you fight, then you go to the the other contest, the other candidates. So first you have to win over the family, then you win over the society and the nation. So this is a very crucial aspect which we learned from this project. And finally, the freedom of making the move from the collective to the individual. Usually, participatory research is about taking the individual to the collective. But we also see that the opposite is possible, and with great results. Thank you.